The Submarine of Death. In the final months of World War I, as Europe lay shattered and oceans carried the scars of endless naval battles, a single German U-boat carved its way across the dark waters of the North Atlantic. It was known as UB-85, one of the deadly fleet of Unterseeboote that terrorized merchant ships with silent precision. Built for stealth, it could lurk beneath the waves unseen, striking without warning, leaving only fire and oil slicks behind. To the men aboard, it was both a weapon and a coffin, its steel hull groaning with the weight of the sea, its air foul with oil, sweat, and fear. By April of 1918, the war was turning against Germany, but UB-85 still prowled the waters, hunting prey in the endless blue. The crew had grown restless, their nerves stretched thin by weeks of claustrophobic silence. They whispered of strange shadows beneath the waves, of sounds that rattled the hull at night, unnatural thuds and scraping noises too rhythmic to be shifting currents. The captain dismissed it all as stress, yet even he could not explain the sensation of being watched from the depths. Then, one night, under a moonless sky, UB-85 surfaced to recharge its batteries. The sea was calm, eerily calm, the kind of silence that carries dread. Men climbed onto the slick deck to breathe fresh air, to stretch, to escape the steel tomb below. That's when they saw it. Something immense broke the surface beside them, rising from the abyss with a hiss of water. The crew froze in horror. What they beheld was no whale, no shark, but something alive with eyes like coals burning through the dark. The monster from below. The crew would later swear that the creature was unlike anything known to man. It had the shape of a serpent, yet thicker, its slick hide glistening with seawater that smelled of decay. Its head, massive and scaled, rose higher than the conning tower of the submarine, its jaws lined with rows of teeth that gleamed like blades. The night erupted with screams as the beast lunged, slamming its weight onto the hull. Metal screeched, the deck shuddered. Some men were thrown overboard, swallowed by the dark sea without a sound. Others clung desperately to the rails as the monster clawed at the submarine's casing with webbed appendages tipped with talon-like hooks. The captain drew his sidearm, firing shots that vanished into the night, the gunfire no more than sparks against a nightmare-made flesh. The monster thrashed, tearing cables, cracking pipes, its sheer force threatening to roll the U-boat onto its side. The men, hardened sailors, were reduced to children, screaming prayers, cursing the sea, begging for salvation. Hours seemed to pass in minutes. The beast struck again and again, denting the submarine's forward casing, breaking light fixtures, smashing railings. By the time it withdrew, slipping back into the depths, UB-85 was left crippled. Its hull was scarred, its systems failing. The men stood trembling, soaked in seawater and oil, staring into the endless black horizon. They had survived the attack, but at a cost. The submarine, their iron predator, was no longer fit to dive. They were adrift, helpless in a war where mercy was rare. And beneath them, the sea held secrets no man was meant to witness. The capture. At dawn, the crippled UB-85 drifted helplessly on the open waters. The crew, hollow-eyed and shaken, worked desperately to repair her, but the damage was too severe. The beast's assault had ruptured pipes, bent plating, and crippled diving mechanisms. Then came a sight more terrifying to them than the creature itself, the silhouette of an enemy warship on the horizon. It was HMS Coreopsis, a British patrol vessel. The Germans were spotted instantly. Normally, a U-boat commander in such a position would order a desperate dive to escape, but UB-85 could no longer submerge. She was caught, exposed like prey in the open sea. The British ship closed in, guns trained on the stricken submarine. The captain of UB-85, weary and beaten, gave the only order left: surrender. White flags were raised, and the crew of Coreopsis prepared to board. The British expected resistance, perhaps even a fight, but what they found was unlike anything recorded in naval history. The Germans abandoned their submarine without struggle, their faces pale, their eyes sunken as if they had seen death itself. The captain, taken into custody, did not resist. Instead, he muttered of a beast from the depths, his voice trembling as he described the attack. To the British, it sounded like madness, an excuse for failure, the ramblings of a man unwilling to admit his ship had been bested by mechanics. But as sailors inspected UB-85, they noted strange damage. Plates bent outward, as if something had ripped at the submarine, pipes torn clean, marks that no torpedo, no shell, no human weapon could explain. The sea had its secrets, and UB-85 had become their witness. The captain's confession. When the captain of UB-85 was brought aboard the HMS Coreopsis, he appeared less like an officer of the Imperial German Navy and more like a man whose soul had been left at the bottom of the ocean. His uniform, once pressed and immaculate, was soaked and tattered, his face gaunt, his eyes wide with a haunted emptiness that chilled even his captors. The British expected arrogance, resistance, perhaps even bitterness from a man whose war machine had been captured intact. But instead, what they heard were ramblings, broken words uttered in a low, trembling voice. In the cold confines of his makeshift cell, the German captain whispered of a nightmare from the deep. He told of the night his submarine had surfaced to recharge batteries, and of how the calm sea had suddenly erupted with violence. He described the creature with feverish clarity, scales black as oil, eyes glowing like embers in a furnace, teeth so sharp that sparks flew as they raked across the steel deck. He claimed that it climbed onto the submarine, its weight tilting the vessel dangerously, and with its claws it ripped at pipes and vents, destroying equipment with unnatural strength. He said that gunfire had no effect, that men screamed prayers into the night before being hurled overboard into the freezing abyss. His voice cracked as he admitted his shame, that he, the commanding officer of a war machine feared across the Atlantic, had been powerless against something older and darker than mankind itself. The British officers who heard him laughed at first, dismissing it as delirium, a story concocted to excuse cowardice or mechanical failure. Yet their laughter faded as engineers confirmed the submarine bore damage inconsistent with torpedoes or mines. To some, the captain's tale was madness. To others, it was a warning, one the sea had delivered with claws and teeth. The Mystery of UB-85. After its capture, UB-85 became a spectacle of war, not because of its surrender, but because of the whispers that clung to it like fog. The British crew who inspected the vessel noted the strange condition of the submarine. Pipes were shredded, not by explosives, but as if torn by claws. Railings twisted outward, their metal bent as though by a force from outside rather than within. One sailor described long grooves carved into the hull, as if something had tried to peel the submarine open like a tin can. And yet, there were no signs of depth charges, no scorch marks from shells, no evidence of human attack. The British Navy, committed to order and reason, filed reports blaming poor maintenance, structural failure, or even sabotage. But the crew who had boarded her whispered among themselves. They spoke of the German sailors' hollow faces, of their trembling hands, of the way some refused to even look back at the submarine as they were ferried away into captivity. They remembered the captain's voice, his words cracking as he insisted that a beast had risen from the abyss to tear at their ship. As the war dragged on, UB-85 was towed to dockyards for examination, yet no definitive explanation was ever recorded. Then, as with many machines of war, the submarine vanished into obscurity, its steel eventually scrapped, its remains scattered. What endured was not the vessel, but the story. The sailors who heard the confession passed it along, retelling the legend of a sea monster that preyed upon a U-boat in the cold Atlantic. And as years passed, the story outlived the war. It became part of the whispered lore of the sea, an unanswered question lurking beneath the waves. What had really attacked UB-85? Was it a tale spun from fear, or had something from the deep claimed its place in history that night? The legend lives on the war ended, nations rebuilt, and submarines like UB-85 were swallowed by history. But the legend of what happened that night refused to sink. Decades later, when fishermen and sailors spoke of shadows moving beneath their boats, when strange carcasses washed ashore with features no biologist could explain, the story of UB-85 was remembered. The sea, vast and unfathomable, has always held secrets beyond the grasp of man. For every discovery, there remain countless mysteries hidden in the deep trenches and black waters where sunlight cannot reach. To skeptics, the account of a sea monster was dismissed as desperate fiction, the ravings of a captain unwilling to admit mechanical failure. But for those who have sailed under moonless skies, who have heard the deep groans of the ocean and felt the weight of unseen things shifting beneath them, the tale resonates with a darker possibility that the crew of UB-85 stumbled upon something real, perhaps an ancient predator that has stalked the depths long before ships carved the waves, perhaps something born of the war itself, drawn to the vibrations of submarines like a hunter to prey. Whatever the truth, the story remains etched in the folklore of the sea, and when divers in modern times claim to feel an unnatural silence in certain parts of the Atlantic, when sonar pings reveal shadows too large to be whales, too deliberate to be schools of fish, the legend of UB-85 rises again. The ocean is eternal, its depths unknowable, its mysteries endless, and somewhere out there, beneath the crushing black water, the beast may still be waiting, patient and hungry. The crew of UB-85 did not die in battle. They died in memory, their legacy carried not by glory, but by terror. The sea never forgets, and it never forgives.